This is Here's How, Ireland's political, social and current affairs podcast, presented by William Campbell.
Thank you for downloading episode 104 of Here's How for the 12th of May 2020. Last time we talked about the compatibility of Fianna Fáil to coalition with the Green Party. Let's see if one newly elected Green TD thinks they can make a go of it.
Here's How is Ireland's political, social and current affairs podcast. Make your view heard. Just dial 076 603 5060 and tell the world what you're thinking. Your voicemail may be included in the next podcast. You can find tips on recording your contribution and other ways to contact the show at here'show.ie/call.
Here's what we've got coming up for you in this podcast.
Yeah, but the reality is that these talks are setting out now with some really ambitious level.
But Malcolm, the most expensive, four most expensive words in history, this time it's different.
It is different, yeah.
How?
There's no doubt about it.
That's coming up shortly, but first I want to thank all of my donors on Patreon. I really appreciate everyone who does that. Patreon is a website that allows people to donate $1 or $2 per podcast or per month. Somebody asked me, why do I say dollars? It's because they only trade in dollars. I can't say euros. And that helps me to devote more time to research and to finding interesting guests. And if you think that you could do the same as them, there's details on the website and at the end of the show. It was announced last week that Bewley's Cafe on Grafton Street in Dublin won't be reopening. The operators said that the lockdown, coupled with high rents, have pushed their business over the edge and it's no longer viable. That's obviously bad news for the 110 staff that work there. There was a lot of comment about that on Twitter. Most of the comments broke down into two categories: nostalgia and protest. The first type was typified by Vivian Lambert. She said, "Such sad news about Bewley's of Grafton Street. My great treat as a child was to go there for a glass of Jersey milk and a cherry bun with my dad." There's loads more in that vein. I have to admit that I could probably have written my own. I have a dim childhood memory of discovering the existence of coffee when I went there with my parents, just about big enough to see over the table when I was sitting on the bench. But the second category of posts was more political. The Green Party MEP Ciarán Cuffe tweeted, "When Bewley's was last under threat 16 years ago, I called up landlord Johnny Ronan and asked could he help. Business is business," was his reply. No change there, it seems. There's much stronger criticism too, best represented by the People Before Profit official Twitter account, which said, "We need decisive state action to force people like Ronan to slash his rents. The state could then move in and take a majority share of Bewley's to preserve jobs and enable the cafe to ride out the storm, as well as preserve a cultural symbol of Dublin life." There was loads more in that vein too, a lot of them very critical, to say the least, of Johnny Ronan. People Before Profit, as you heard, advocated the nationalisation of Bewley's. Other people made a variety of suggestions of market interventions the government could make to keep the cafe open. These ranged from seizing Johnny Ronan's property to forcing him to reduce rent or giving a government subsidy to Bewley's, or make some other law to make it impossible to open any other business on the premises, and other daft ideas, including some suggestion of a GoFundMe to cover their costs, but I'm not sure how serious that was. There doesn't seem to be any such campaign on GoFundMe at the moment. But there's a problem with all those ideas, no matter how harebrained or level-headed they seem to be. It's this: Bewley's was a business. Bewley's was a business and it failed. And from my memories of the place, it richly deserved to fail. That's not to say anything against the staff. I never did any analysis of the business, so I don't know why it was failing, but it was failing. In my experience, it was grubby. You could write your name with your finger in the grease on the tables. The fare was substandard, and the prices were astronomical. It's very noticeable that the people who shared memories of Bewley's were sharing childhood memories from decades ago. It was all about how they went there as a child, or how the architecture or the stained glass was so nice. There wasn't anyone saying, I was there a couple of months ago and the food was great. And in the decades since, when most of the nostalgia tweeters seem to have been in Bewley's last, the range and quality of food available in cafes and restaurants in Dublin has improved exponentially. And in Bewley's, it hadn't. The food range for customers has vastly improved because people in businesses big and small have invested money, talent and sweat in making it better. It's a hugely competitive market and new places are opening and closing every month. All of those places have to pay commercial rents, salaries and taxes, and they all compete with each other. Whether it's a direct government subsidy to Bewley's or some other advantage like forcing their rent down by banning competing businesses from opening at the same location, the bottom line is that is giving an advantage to a badly run business and imposing a disadvantage on the better run ones. The fact is that people don't want cherry buns anymore. The newer entrants to the market thrive, for the most part, because they cater to customers' tastes. If people want avocado focaccia instead, sure, you can scoff, you can laugh at them. But are we going to really get politicians to intervene and force people to keep buying cherry buns that they don't want? Now, I know that there's a lot to say about Johnny Ronan and the bad politics of bailouts, and I've commented before on this podcast that Grafton Street, where Bewley's is one of the highest rent shopping streets in the world, with big name stores queuing to get in, and literally 100 metres away is South William Street, where there's a huge vacancy rate because of the insane way we tax work instead of property. But cruel and greedy and all as his comment is, he's right. Business is business. If Bewley's can't make a profit on Grafton Street, then it's time for them to move on and make way for a business that can turn a buck. I know that all those people who want to seize the means of cherry bun production for the proletariat mean well, but if you follow that logic, then every failing business would be propped up by taxing every successful business more. We'd have a lot more failing and a lot less success. And seriously, cherry buns? They're disgusting.
Do you agree? Do you disagree? If you want your point of view heard, dial 076 603 5060 and leave a contribution for the show. The lines are open 24/7 and you can find tips on how to record a good contribution and other ways to contact the podcast at here'show.ie/call.
On the line, I have the newly elected Green Party TD for Carlow Kilkenny, Malcolm Noonan. Malcolm, your party is entering into negotiations with Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael about the possibility of making a three-party coalition government. What would constitute success and failure from those negotiations?
Well, from our perspective, we made it clear at the outset of before considering entering negotiations that the attainment of a 7% cut in greenhouse gas emissions year on year towards 2030 had to be a prerequisite to talks. So we've received that commitment, as well as a number of other indications from both Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael in relation to social justice issues, housing and healthcare and direct provision. We felt it important to establish a baseline from our own point of view and to, I suppose, assess a level of commitment and ambition by the two parties before we entered into formal talks.
So the real big hit there is 7% reduction in carbon emissions year on year. So that's 7% down next year from this year and 7% lower than that the next year and so on. And that, if you do the maths, brings you to about halving it within 10 years. Are you saying that you've got indications from them that they will essentially roll over, or that Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael will roll over and will agree to that?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, it's not even a case of rolling over. It's a agreement in common principle that we can achieve this. Certainly, both Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael have asked us for the figures in terms of how it could be achieved, but we're fairly clear that it can across all sectors. It's no doubt is going to be incredibly challenging, but the reason we've gone for the 7% is that it's a minimum ask. We're saying not less than, and I think that's important in the sense that we've looked at a decade of inaction when we would have been required to achieve a 3% cut on greenhouse gas emissions, and that was never achieved. So
that's interesting. That's interesting because in the last Green Party government, which you were not a member of, there was a commitment to 3% year on year, and that just didn't happen. And one would have to question the Green Party's, not in perhaps the negotiating skills, but perhaps their negotiating skills, but also their enforcement skills. Essentially, you got an agreement, the Green Party got an agreement, which was then ignored by the government, or Fianna Fáil managed to run rings around you and ignore that. Is that going to happen again?
No, I mean, I don't think it was ignored. Lots of factors contributed to the fact that we didn't achieve it. There was up to the time of the economic crash in 2008-9, the country was in rampant economic growth. Mm-hmm. And I think certainly there was, I would say in that particular government, there was a lack of understanding or ability to see a process through. We introduced
So have you learned the lessons?
I think everyone has learned the lessons. I think, I think the former Taoiseach Enda Kenny signed the Paris Agreement on behalf of the Irish government and the Irish people in 2015.
And wasn't it Denis Naughton who signed it?
Yeah, but the issue there is that the Irish government has made a commitment, and the Joint Oireachtas Committee on Climate Action has signed off on a document whereby we agree to limit greenhouse gas emissions to 7% reduction per annum, and to achieve the Paris goal, which is not less than 1.5 degree warming, which in itself is
and that's more or less the same thing. You have to have negative growth of about 7% a year. The maths are in order to limit the warming to about plus 1.5 degrees Celsius. But I just want to hold off on that because I spoke to someone who was involved in the Green Party at the time of the 2007 negotiations, and that person was quite critical of the people who were doing the negotiations and felt, and I think was proven correct, that they were not getting sufficiently watertight agreements. And what that was expressed as saying that any promise that doesn't include three things, that's to say a date, a deliverable and a budget. That's to say what you're going to do, when you're going to do it by, and how much you're going to spend on doing it. If you don't have that triangle, if you're missing one part of that triangle, you essentially have nothing in terms of commitment. That's true, isn't it?
It is, and I think that, this time out, we're heading into these talks in good faith with the two parties, and it's Are you sure that
they are?
We hope so, yeah.
Okay, well, hold with that idea for a second. Hold with that idea for a second, because, of course, before going into this, your party published a 17-point list of what were at one point described as demands, at another point described as questions. But they include things like, point number 8, having a new social contract. Point number 7, a deep retrofit program for energy efficient housing. Point number 11, development of a national land use plan. Point number 2, a renewable energy development. None of those have any measurable goals that somebody could come along 1 year or 2 years or 5 years later and say that is on track to be achieved or that is achieved. They're all very woolly, aren't they, Malcolm?
The document itself, in terms of our response to the Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael document to us, I think it's not going to be prescriptive, and it's not supposed to be. These are pre-negotiation questions that we posed to the two parties. And
so do you believe that the result of your negotiation will have firm numbers on those commitments?
Yeah, we would hope so. I mean, we're not going to preempt anything out of the talks. The talks will determine these variables and the achievable goals over the course of that period and result in a draft programme for government. I mean, the reality is we've got to present a draft programme for government to our members that has to be reflective of the ambition of the Green Party members, and that has to receive a 2/3 majority. So it's important from our point of view that we go into these talks in a very positive frame of mind, but also with a very determined set of objectives to try and achieve from those talks. And everything in government has to be measurable and targeted and deliverable and costed. So I think
Well, it doesn't, because if you want to know, hold on a second. If you're, for example, someone in Fianna Fáil who wants to get the Greens Party support but doesn't really want to do any of the stuff that you guys want to do, it's quite handy to have lots of airy promises of prioritizing things and looking at things and seriously considering things which don't actually commit you to do anything. That's quite useful for them, isn't it?
I can't see that happening in these type of talks. I think generally what, from our experience...
It happened the last time.
Yeah, but the reality is that these talks are setting out now with some really ambitious level
But Malcolm, the four most expensive words in history, this time it's different.
It is different, yeah.
How?
There's no doubt about it. Well, I think that we're entering these talks in good faith with the two parties to try and achieve a stronger programme for government as possible. I think our members are very clear that they will not accept a programme for government that lacks ambition and lacks targeted measures. I think that's fairly clear from our point of view. And we go in, as you do, any party goes in, or independents go in good faith into talks to achieve the best desirable outcome from their policy perspective. And that's how we will go into these talks.
Okay. Well, just to look at what Green Party sources were saying around the time and just before the election actually happened, when you were successful. Congratulations on that, by the way. But what the Green Party leadership was saying then is that in order to go into a coalition government, the Green Party would need to be both wanted and needed. Now, wanted is one thing in terms of policy agreement and so forth, but needed is a very clear measure. The Green Party would be needed by whatever their coalition partner or partners would be in order to get over the line to have 80 votes to be able to have a majority in the Dáil. Now, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael have 72 seats between them. But that's only the people who are currently members of the parliamentary party. There's 4 more TDs there that are former members of Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael, which brings them to 76. And if you throw in former party members who were not party members as a TD, that brings them to 79. There's another 3. And then there's Fine Gael supporters who were supporting the last Fine Gael minority government, such as Sean Canny and Noel Grealish. That's 81 straight away. The bottom line is, if you were 2 years down the road and the Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael thought that you guys were getting a bit too uppity and difficult to handle, and the Green Party was saying, if you don't stick to your commitments, we're going to leave, they can say, well, don't let the door hit you on the arse on the way out. You can go and we can stay in government.
Well, I mean, I think if we go into the talks with that frame of mind, really, we're on a back foot, and I think it's.
But come on, Malcolm, if you do that, you have very, very little negotiating power if you don't have the power to walk away from the government and say, if we walk, the government will collapse.
Yeah, but the Taoiseach has been quite clear that the preference has been to have three parties, and that we bring a block of 12. Which I think is significant.
But Fianna Fáilers and Fine Gaelers bring a block of 13.
We are still the 4th biggest party in the country, and I think that in itself has. It's not just that, but it is. We did campaign in the run to the election on the change agenda, and we'd bring that issue of that big issue, which is the big existential crisis that faces us all, which is climate change.
Okay, hold that thought, Malcolm. Hold that thought of campaigning on a change agenda, and just focus on the one question: are you not even slightly worried that if this government were to go through, you would not have the power to bring it down were it to turn out that Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil were insincere? Does that not worry you at all?
No, it doesn't. I mean, we're not going into these talks to try and achieve that or to bring down a government. I think the essential thing, given the crisis that we're going through right now and the uncertainty that many people are facing, is that we are going to require a stable government for 4 to 5 years. First of all, to get us through the health part of the crisis, the legacy of that health part, and the economic crisis that's with us now and is going to be with us for a number of years. as well as that to meet our climate and biodiversity targets and ambitions. So I think it's much more than that we are just, that we would threaten to bring down government because things weren't going our way. I think it's really important that if we go in, like I said at the outset, that we go in good faith into talks and if a programme for government is approved by our members, that we're in there for the long haul and we're in there to work together and collaboratively to ensure that we achieve the best outcome for the Irish people and for the Irish state.
Okay. But you said, and I thought it was very important, you said there that you were elected on a change agenda, and that is emphatically true, not least in your case, because when on the first count, you were significantly behind. Both Bobby Aylward and Pat Deering lost their seats in Carlow Kilkenny despite having more first preference votes than you did. And you essentially won. You leapfrogged them because you got a whack of transfers, principally from Sinn Féin and from People Before Profit. And those are voters who transferred to you because you were, as you put it, on a change agenda. Do you think those voters, those specific ones who transferred from Sinn Féin and People Before Profit to you, will be happy with you going into government with Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael?
I don't know that, and that's
have a guess.
Honest answer.
Oh, come on, have a guess.
Well, it'd be interesting to know where those votes transferred across. Certainly being out.
They transferred from People Before Profit and Sinn Féin to you.
Just hear me out.
Okay.
The questions that came across in relation to that, and if anyone who had been out at the count at the Carlow Kilkenny constituency, I'm not sure how this played out for other constituencies. Votes went everywhere, right across the board.
No, hang on. No. I've got the figures. Malcolm. I've got the figures here. Adrienne Wallace, People Before Profit, had 4,800 votes when she was eliminated. You got, of that 4,008, you got more than 2,000 votes. That's about 4 times more than the next best TD out of that. And you got also a good transfer from Sinn Féin. Those were radical voters. They're people who voted 1 or 2 Sinn Féin and People Before Profit and went down to 3 or maybe 4 after Labour to the Green Party.
Yeah,
that's a big chunk of your vote, and without those you would not be a TD, correct?
One of the some of the analysis that came out of that was that the candidates who supported the repeal campaign got a specific support. There was a concerted campaign nationally and in the Carlow Kilkenny constituency to support candidates who supported repeal, and I would have been one of them. I think that there's that element to it. Second of all, I think
so was John Paul Phelan. He didn't get that many transfers from People Before Profit.
I don't know if John Paul supported the repeal, did he?
I think he did, but in any case, my point is,
I don't think he did.
I'll let that stand. But although he was a member of Fine Gael, but nevertheless, my point is that you were the one party that broke from that change agenda where the Social Democrats, Sinn Féin and yourselves did very well during the election. And when this whole process started, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, they were pretty cute. They said, we're not talking to anybody until we make a joint front between ourselves. And then they're able to pick off one of the, let's say, change or left-wing parties to prop them up. They're showing signs already of being able to outmaneuver you. Isn't that true?
I don't think so. I go back to the election result. I think, we're absolutely grateful for those transfers. There were our votes. They came to us in the end, and we got across the line after many, many years of trying. I've been a councillor in Kilkenny for 16 years prior to achieving this success, and I had a track record in Kilkenny City and County to show that. But I think it's important too that we immediately after the general election sat down and spoke collaboratively to all the parties and independents. We sat down with Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, Sinn Féin, with the Soc Dems, with Labour, and with independents and PVP.
Yeah, so but the real movers who are being excluded are Sinn Féin. It would have been smart for you and Sinn Féin to make an alliance and to say we talk as a unit, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I've spoken at length to Kathleen Funchion, my constituency colleague, about this. I think perhaps the speech made by Micheál Martin on the opening day of the Dáil really kind of scuppered the possibility of that. And certainly, the Sinn Féin received a significant mandate. We would have found an awful lot of commonality with Sinn Féin on policies around health and housing in particular during those Strand talks. And it certainly would have represented the change agenda a lot more inclusively, I think, and but it wasn't to be. And from our point of view, we have to try and implement our policies, and that's why our parliamentary party has opted to go into talks.
Okay, and you talk a lot about trust. You talk a lot about trust, Malcolm. But for example, one of the big things that the Green Party did in the 2007 Fianna Fáil coalition was to bring in an 80% windfall tax on rezoning profits, and that was a very important feature of taking the speculation out of the property market. As soon as Fine Gael got into government, they ditched that.
Yeah.
Will you be looking to bring that back in? And surely, you'd have to be saying to Fine Gael across the cabinet table, what the hell were you doing, lads? Why is it that the profits of millionaires and in some cases billionaires who are speculating on building land, why is that so much more important than people who are trying to buy a house?
Yeah, certainly all of those issues will have to be discussed during the talks. I can't preempt what's going to go on in the talks. And these are the issues we will bring. We were trying to end that development, that drive towards speculative development. And I think that's important that we move towards site valuation tax and a much better use of our land, public lands and private lands as well. So I think all of those will be played out in the talks. Okay,
but you say better, and anybody can sign up to that if there isn't a number and a date attached to it. And if somebody says, "Oh yeah, we'll do that within the lifetime of the government," then the bottom line is that promise has not been breached until the government has fallen, in which case it is unenforceable.
Yeah, I can't argue with that. I simply cannot, at this stage, preempt what's going to transpire in the talks. We walk into the talks with our policies; they walk into the talks with theirs.
Oh, okay. Then two very quick final questions in that case. And you mentioned the Paris Climate Accord, which doesn't specify that number, but effectively, in effect, it says we need to be at net negative 7% CO2 growth every year going forward. Can you give an absolute commitment that you will not be part of a government that breaches the Paris Climate Accord?
No government can breach it, and I think we have to.
We've been doing it up to now.
Yes, but
Ireland's been paying fines for breaking those rules.
We've been absolutely clear heading into these talks that the 7% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions per annum is a must, and that's
so you're saying that let's say 2 years down the line, if that target is not being met and there is no chance of it being met on the horizon, you'll walk out.
The 7% is an average. The Paris Agreement commits the signatory nations to not to limiting global warming to not more than 1.5.
Yes.
With a maximum of 2, and the trajectory for Ireland to achieve that is the 7%.
Yeah, so you might be at minus 6.9 one year and minus 7.1 the next year. That'd be fair enough. But if you're at plus 5% for 2 years running, then you know that you're not anywhere near that. And the question is, will you be part of a government that is breaching the Paris Climate Agreement?
There's a lot of...
I'm not hearing a no.
No, there's a lot of different... issues there, because for this year we could be looking at 8-9% contraction. Next year it could be less. There will be a lag time between if we go into a deep retrofit program where those impacts. There's a lot of
sure, yeah, and it's possible to forward project that and to say how much you'll get if you reduce heating bills and so forth by so much. But at the end of the day, it's possible to see that, isn't it?
It is possible to see it, but
will you be part of it if they're not going to hit that target?
There's a lag time between trying to set out policy objectives, implement them, and specific measurable programs in agriculture, in transport, in home heating, in retrofit programs, between those projects being initiated and how they are measured in terms of their progress on reducing emissions. So you can really only look over a cumulative period, over 3 to 4 to 5 year period, and annually assess where the reductions are being met, where some areas will be successful, some won't. So I think it would be to say that you would look at 2 years. It's really impossible to do that.
Okay, you have 12 TDs now and 2 members of Seanad Éireann. Are you entirely confident that if you go into government all 14 of them will be signed up as Green Party members of the government.
Yes. Yeah, we are. Yeah, we're going into these talks unified, and I think we have a lot to achieve from it. I think it's it's the biggest representation we've had in Dáil Éireann, and we feel quite positive about the talks.
Malcolm Noonan, long-time Kilkenny councillor, now Green Party TD for Carlow Kilkenny. Thank you very much for talking to me.
Thank you.
Never miss a show. Follow at Here's How Podcast on Twitter and like Here's How on Facebook for updates on each show's contents.
Go to the website for sources and references from the show, and while you're there you can like the show on Facebook, follow the show on Twitter at Here's How Podcast, and follow Malcolm Noonan at Malcolm Noonan1. And get in touch with me if you can suggest a guest or a topic for a future show. And thanks again to all the donors from Patreon who helped me to devote more time to research and to finding interesting guests. And if you could do the same as them and donate $1 or $2 per podcast or per month, go to patreon.com/Here's How. That link is on the website, and there you can also find how to subscribe to the podcast for free on your computer, on your phone, or by email. All that information is at www.hereshow.ie. The Here's How podcast is produced and presented by me, William Campbell. Thank you for listening.